Good evening, everyone. I'm Dunwoody Mayor Lynn Deutsch, and I want to thank you for joining us for this special webinar designed to share strategies for coping for middle school families and their students. But keep in mind, much of what we're going to discuss tonight can apply to kids and probably even adults of any age. It has been a tremendously difficult and long year. We are grateful for the chance to partner with the Summit Counseling Center during these challenging times. Before the pandemic began, Summit was expanding in-school services at Peachtree Charter Middle School and Dunwoody High School. Those services are remote for now, but it's just as important as ever. When we scheduled this Zoom, we didn't know that DeKalb County Schools would resume in-person learning the very same week. This decision has brought relief to many and new stresses for some, and we look forward to covering both sides of the coin tonight. We invite you to share your questions and concerns using the Zoom chat or by posting comments on Facebook Live. I'll be back in a bit to share your questions with our panel. But first, I'd like to introduce Kathy Murphy, Director of Community Outreach for Summit Counseling. Summit Counseling has been a tremendous partner with the city of Dunwoody during the pandemic, and I'm so pleased they're joining us once again tonight. Ms. Murphy will have a few words, and then she'll bring in tonight's expert panel. Thank you, Kathy.
Good evening. I want to thank the mayor and the city of Dunwoody for hosting this event tonight, and to all of you that are joining us for this timely discussion. Before we get started, I would like to thank 3 of our community partners that have supported the Summit's programming in Dunwoody. We couldn't do what we do without our partnerships with organizations like these. Our partnership with the DeKalb County School District provides a therapist on site at Dunwoody High School and Peachtree Charter Middle School. And as the mayor said, we're currently virtual and we'll be going back into the building as the students start to go back in, and we'll be offering a hybrid of either virtual or face-to-face. The Summit received funding from the city of Dunwoody through the CARES Act to help subsidize counseling services for individuals and families in need that live in Dunwoody. And our partnership with Dunwoody United Methodist Church provides office space for our community counseling center and funding to subsidize counseling services for families in need at our Dunwoody office. Tonight, you will be hearing from each of the 4 therapists that support our Dunwoody programs. Some of the topics we'll be discussing tonight will be different types of trauma, some warning signs we're seeing in adolescents. We'll learn some coping skills and talk about self-care. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Alexa.
Thank you, Kathy. My name's Alexa Melman, and I am one of the newer therapists at Summit Counseling, and I specialize in trauma. So I will be talking a little bit about that tonight. Thank you. My father was a helicopter pilot in the Army, and my mother is a nurse. So they always taught me to know your enemy and that the best defense is a good offense. So tonight, talking about trauma, it might not immediately seem relevant to coping with COVID, but anytime you're talking about coping, you're talking about filling our spiritual, our emotional, our mental and social reserves, filling that account. And the enemy of that is going to be trauma. Just a quick trauma 101. This is to explain kind of what happens when we experience trauma. In that bottom rectangle, you'll see the green zone, social engagement. This is where we spend most of our lives. It's a place where we're in the present moment, where we're grounded, we're relaxed, we're connected to others, we have purpose, things make sense, we have routine. And then every now and then, usually daily, we experience some sort of trauma represented by that wavy line. Depending on the threat level, we can get activated all the way up to a freeze state, but usually it just hits that flight or fight level where we get a blast of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, into our blood, and a bunch of adrenaline that mobilizes us to fight. Our heart rate increases, our blood pressure raises, our pupils dilate. It's a pretty primitive response that was really helpful when we had to run from bears and you know, fight predators. But now, unfortunately, we are dealing with some pretty complex threats on that pretty old school operating system. So things like when we're late in traffic, probably not going to kill us, but we still have that survival response of getting to fight or flight. Now, over time, if we get activated too many times, our brain starts to recognize that we're in a danger state, and it has a lot of trouble moving back down to the social engagement zone, which is where we feel safe, relaxed, where children especially can even develop, where their brains can continue to mature. And in threats that we don't feel like we can escape or that we don't feel like we can overcome, we shut down. We go into the freeze state, which is we become numb, depressed, helpless, hopeless. We feel trapped. And unfortunately, for people who tend to get aroused a lot in that fear response, they also tend to go into that state of helplessness. And a lot of this will make sense later when we start looking at symptoms of trauma. But just so you know, this is what a trauma response looks like. You can recognize this in yourself, family members. Again, when you can recognize that they're calm and relaxed, you're in social engagement, irritation, anger, rage, fighting, bickering, or panic and withdrawal. You know that that's a stimulated, but it's still a feeling of wanting to engage the fight. The dorsal vagal, the depression, the numbness, the complete withdrawal. Those are when some red flags should start going off, because that means it's affecting you pretty hard. A lot of us, when we think of trauma, we naturally think of veterans and wartime, or armed assaults, really sudden violent things like natural disasters. But really, it's any time your brain or body registers a threat and that you feel like you are truly in danger. That can be experiencing violence, injuries, and illness. And as I'm going through this list, like, try to think how you're seeing this show up in this pandemic. Injuries and illness, death, feeling horror, fear, or helplessness, toxic stress, which is just stress after stress after stressor, repeated injuries to your feelings of purpose, safety, and belonging, disruption in your cultural norms and routines. And here's the kicker too, because we're such social animals, we don't even have to experience these things ourselves. If we are constantly hearing other people's stories, even if they're survivor stories of making it through these, our bodies will still register that to us as stress, because our brains, trauma response is really amazing. It is just your brain being on guard to keep you alive and well as long as possible. So yeah, your brain is like, okay, I'm going to make note of that because I don't want any part of that. Now, most of us can experience these things in varying levels throughout the day and throughout our lives. We will suffer a bit, and then we will work our way back to normal. Some people, that's a lot harder. Some people, if you are, for example, a survivor of childhood trauma, abuse, or neglect, because you learn what's safe and what's not in that time, you might grow up to be further risk of being victimized by trauma, because you don't know when it's safe and you don't know when it's dangerous. You don't know who to trust. People who are socially isolated, because so much of our coping comes from other people, our connection, comfort. The introverts, even happy introverts, are more at risk to experience trauma because they usually have to do more of the work on their own. First responders, healthcare workers, any time you work or volunteer for something that exposes you to the suffering of other people can put you at a higher risk to suffer more severely from trauma. People with a family or personal history of mental illness, substance use history, and difficulty expressing or managing emotions. And I always thought that was interesting too, because we think that people who can't manage their emotions, like, sure, they'll be vulnerable, but it's also people that can't express them. It's the strong silent types that can be particularly vulnerable to traumatic stress and traumatic injury, which is why you see a lot of it in police officers and soldiers. Some different types. We have inherited trauma, which is really fascinating. That's something that's kind of new on our radars, where we are seeing that trauma actually alters our DNA. So really, really good motivation to go in there and get that treated if you have any personal trauma or if you see it in your children, to address it and reverse the effects as much as possible. We've got PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's where you stay in that red zone. It's very hard for you to get back down into the green, healthy, happy, growing area. And vicarious trauma, that's what we talked about just a minute ago, a little bit with the first care or with the first responders and healthcare workers. It's where you pretty much just take on someone else's trauma. And the last one is collective trauma. And that's actually been pretty new to me. I hadn't studied it as much until COVID, and I've actually been seeing a lot more on the news. And that's when large groups of people or entire cultures go through a devastating event, much like we are with COVID right now. Some trauma symptoms, again, this kind of goes back to know your enemy. These are some really good things to look for. In the immediate aftermath, you're likely to see some numbness and detachment, some shock symptoms, right? And anxiety. A lot of people feel guilt, like they're not doing enough. Anger, sadness, helplessness, sometimes a feeling of unreality or disconnection from the body, like people just seem kind of dazed. Um, Feeling out of control, feelings of denial, not acknowledging what's going on, pretending like everything is as normal. On the opposite end, people get completely overwhelmed, uh, look for elevated heart rates, faster breathing, sweating, nightmares, a lot of overactivation, but then also if it gets elevated enough, you see that extreme fatigue. Um, it is exhausting to have a traumatic response, right? Because our body is thinking like, this is it, this is live or die, like we've got to give it our all. And you just can't maintain that for any sort of time. You have to be able to rest. So if you're constantly getting activated, you're going to be drained pretty quickly. Um, Racing thoughts. A lot of this shows up at bedtime. I don't know how many of you are like me, but my brain never has more to say to me than it does at midnight when I've got to be up at 6 a.m. to get the kids ready for school the next day. There can be distortion of time and space, uh, increased startle reaction, like being really jumpy, restless, argumentative. These are all things that we see immediately after a traumatic event. So in this case, like right probably about a year ago when things started to get pretty real. Some of the more delayed emotional reactions are irritability and hostility. Again, because your bank is getting depleted, and you're going to see depression because people are exhausted, they're burnt out, they don't have any more feelings left to give. A lot of mood swings and instability, anxiety, fear. A lot of people responding with grief reactions because in a lot of ways we are all experiencing the loss of life as we knew it, and we can have hope that it will come back, but in the meantime we still really miss it. um, Feelings of shame, vulnerability, detachment, And again, the sleep disturbances are really big. That's usually my number one question when I'm talking to somebody to determine the level of seriousness. Is the sleep is one of the biggest things to be affected, and it's one of the first. Um, the good news being that if you can get some good sleep habits back in place, that does wonders. Appetite, digestive changes, weight gain, weight loss, um, having a lot of elevated cortisol levels, you're probably going to be sick more often. You'll be more susceptible to illness. Um, Suicidal behavior, self-blame, magical thinking, where you just feel like this is all just going to go away. It's all just going to disappear. I don't need to do anything. Um, so those are some of the signs. And I have a list that I would be happy to send anybody who wants it, because sometimes it's also comforting to know that these weird things that are happening to you or that you're feeling or expressing aren't actually that weird at all. Like it's just a completely normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And fortunately, uh, it's very scary to think that we are experiencing trauma, or worse, that our children are experiencing trauma. But from trauma, we can find post-traumatic growth. We can come out on the other side stronger and happier and more grateful than we were going in. We learn resilience, which after this, we are going to be able to tell all of our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren about the great plague of 2020, and how strong we were and how we banded together. Our supportive relationships are going to be so strong because we're really seeing how much we need each other and how much we love each other. And this is coming from like the world's biggest introvert. I had no idea how much I love other people and how much I need that time with other people. So luckily, my sweet friends who have stuck by me are going to have a much better, much better friend after this. And solidarity. We are all going through this together. And especially if you're engaging in activities to help your neighbors and help each other and stay connected, it forms those bonds and again refills those tanks that are the enemy of trauma. It's how we fight back, is with love and happiness and connection and joy. So the more that you can pull together and rally together and just say like, yeah, this stinks, like, man, we're pretty awesome, like we made it through a whole year of this, and I'm sure a lot of us have had to overcome a lot. uh so yeah, to really pull on those relationships, and you can come out of trauma stronger and better than when you started. And I wanted to include these two because I have children, and parenting in a pandemic has been traumatic to say the least. Um, and I just feel like I can't do anything right, like team sports and going out and play dates. And it just feels like I'm failing them. And a lot of the experts say, this makes me feel better, so I hope it works for you too, that as much as we're straining, we're also showing incredible resilience, and that our children are learning from those tiny moments. Um, the times when we're a little bit more creative and might load everybody into the car and just go drive around and listen to music. Or we've had picnics in the pickup, where we pull out blankets into the bed of our pickup truck and we have family picnics out there, and driveway parties where everybody's socially distanced. Um, our kids are seeing that. They're seeing us try, they're seeing us struggle, um, but they're also seeing us try. So even if we aren't doing perfect, they do see that we're engaged. If you're here, if you're watching this, I mean, there you go. You cared enough to watch a webinar about how to handle COVID stress. And then another expert saying that we should try to keep the children at the center of what we're doing, but also without shortchanging our own needs. Even if you feel as a parent that you're not doing the best job in the universe, you're doing the best you can, and your kids know that, and they'll be okay. I love that. That's very comforting for me. And just as a therapist, I always say this is a time for grace, and especially with middle-aged children or middle school aged children, it's a lot of turmoil. Their bodies are changing, and with all that, the hormones, and it's incredibly stressful. And just to kind of be okay with that. It can be hard. We want to fix things when we see them sad or stressed or angry, like we want to take that away. But sometimes, like just saying, oof, yeah, it's hard. I love you, and I'm here if you need me. Um, just my little personal plug there as a trauma therapist. Thank you so much.
Hey, and so my name is Allison Bates, and I'm actually a play therapist at Summit Counseling and a SOS therapist. So I actually am a school-based therapist as well. In my prior life, I was actually an elementary school teacher. It's kind of a beautiful marriage of my two careers, and I love counseling. It's amazing. So I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit about things that we're seeing in these kids right now during this pandemic. So firstly, emotional responses. I know a lot of parents I speak with are trying to shield their kids from all of the COVID news. And as much as we're trying so hard, it's still seeping in and they're still getting it. I actually had one child tell me in session, what if they give me the virus and my whole family dies? So these kids are having a hard time really comprehending what this means for us. As well as, we are protecting our society, but everybody that gets it isn't dying. So there is that hope in it. Some symptoms we're seeing of worry are memory lags, worsening grades, kids and teens acting silly to either try to lighten the mood or the polar opposite, throwing those tantrums and those outbursts. Headaches and stomach issues, that worry is really, really weighing on them, as well as having worries that seem irrelevant or asking the same questions repeatedly. That is how a child who doesn't know how to process that's how they really try to process it, is they don't know how to verbalize, hey, I'm really worried about X. So they might ask you over and over again, are we going to the park? Are there going to be kids at the park? What if a kid touched the swing at the park? What's happening? So that's their way of really trying to process it. So this is a beautiful depiction of anxiety. I think that anxiety is one of the easiest emotions for us to show people. And so that's often what we see. However, as you can tell with this graphic, it's usually not our primary emotion. It's a secondary emotion we latch onto because it's easier to show. So it's helpful for you as the parent or for you as yourself to check in with your child or yourself and say, hey, why am I anxious? Let's see if I can figure it out. And if you can, fantastic. You might be overwhelmed, and so you could take a little break. You might be embarrassed that someone hurt your feelings, or you might not be able to pinpoint it, and that's okay as well. Another thing we're seeing is developmental regression. And so we often look at it as a toddler behavior. However, that is not necessarily the case. Definitely my teenagers I see are showing some developmental regression, and even adults right now. And that can look like outbursts and tantrums, bathroom accidents with the littles usually, increase of crying for sometimes seeming no reason, forgetting behaviors or information they previously knew or mastered. And that also goes for adults. If you're in a meeting and I knew this yesterday, I knew this 10 minutes ago, and then you just cannot for the life of you get it. And especially with those kiddos right now who are getting tested, that's affecting them, definitely. Baby talk and wanting to be comforted. And so as adults, we look at our kiddos and we're like, you know this, you mastered this. So we kind of get frustrated when they don't know how to do something they already knew how to do. But I really encourage you to try to soften your heart and try to comfort them, because they really need a little extra of that right now. And so of course I had to bring up tech time. Everyone, every parent, everyone in the world for the most part right now is increasing their technology usage, right? And as the graphic shows us, the more non-academic screen time we're seeing, the less physical activity, which makes sense because we are being quarantined as well. However, that increased tech time is also slowing down their development of cognitive, emotional, social, and psychomotor development. We're also seeing more headaches, more sleep and wake disorders where they can't get to sleep or they can't stay asleep, or they sleep way too much. And that's a big one with our teenagers. And then a lot more of kids having eye issues. If you really notice, the vast majority of our kids have some sort of glasses now, whereas that wasn't necessarily the case when I was growing up. So what can we do about it? Like I mentioned in the last slide, limiting tech time is a really big way to kind of cut down on some of that anxiety, as well as listening to their emotions, listening to what's going on. And we as parents like to jump in and try to fix their problem because we want them to be happy. But they often just need someone to listen to them and just to sit there and commiserate and say, I know this does suck and that's okay. Grounding activities, meditation, yoga, bubble breathing. Noticing your toes is a technique that we're teaching to the kids and even adults, because if you notice one part of your body, it really helps you to focus and calm down, and it helps to relax some of the physiological anxiety symptoms, the headaches, the heart rate, the racing thoughts. It kind of eases those. Having a place to retreat to. And so that may be your garden, it may be your bedroom, it may be a park nearby. And some people don't have that, or going somewhere like that doesn't help them because they might see people and that will make them nervous. So creating their own safe place, whether that be just closing your eyes and imagining the most peaceful place you can, guided meditation. If ever you just can't figure it out, if you Google or YouTube guided meditation, you will find one for every setting imaginable: beach, fields, wherever. They're amazing. Having family time, preferably without that technology usage. So board game nights, imagined play, going to the park, whatever you can do to really develop that attachment. Creative time. So the last part of the brain to develop is that emotional reasoning and that verbal reasoning part. So if the kids and even teenagers can't verbally express their worries and fears, giving them a nonverbal way to express themselves, such as art and music, dramatic play, whatever you can find, is very helpful. And lastly, really kind of focusing on the future. Right now, we're all stuck in the here and now and in our houses, and it's very stressful. And so helping them think not only, you know, what is it going to be like after we're able to go out into the world again? What kind of family trips do we want to take? What kind of friendship groups do you want to be a part of? But also just the future in general. What do you want to be when you get older? What kind of house do you want to have when you can pick your own type of house? Those types of questions to help them think outside of the here and now, because the here and now is really stressful for these kiddos, even for us. And so these are some techniques that we can do for ourselves as adults, but definitely for the kids.
Okay, I'm Dr. Page. I have been with Summit for a little more than 2 years now, and I am at Dunwoody High School and Peachtree Charter Middle School. That almost went out. I work a lot with teens and middle schoolers who are struggling with anxiety and depression. That's a population I'm really passionate about and I really enjoy working with. So today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about different coping strategies, and these are good for youth and also really good for parents. So anybody can kind of use these. These are helpful for pretty much everybody. Okay. So the first one on the list to talk about is behavioral activation. And that is all about just kind of getting out and doing things. So when folks are depressed, sort of one of the hallmarks of that is like lack of motivation, not really wanting to do anything. And that's exactly what you should be doing. So even when you don't feel like it, just kind of getting out and being active, encouraging you to find something to do. And it doesn't have to be anything that's really detailed or really involved. It just has to be pleasurable to them and something that they could be successful at. So just sort of like just getting out there and being busy and just doing things. Another strategy is called 3 Good Things. And that is really about focusing on what's going well right now. Whenever you're depressed, it just pretty much the human condition is to sort of be to think like, okay, what's not going well right now? What's not right? What could be better? And 3 Good Things is just about focusing on, aren't great in all aspects of my life, but what is going well? What are 3 things that I can focus on that are going really well right now? Next is gratitude and positive journaling. So just sort of like taking the time out to be intentional, to think about what are things that I'm grateful for? What are things that are going well in my life? Putting, a pencil to paper and really being mindful about what are these things in my life that I'm happy that I currently have. And then last but not least, just fostering these relationships and social support. So with COVID, we haven't been able to get out and be as active with folks socially as we were previously, but just being creative about how that happens. So if it's, over the phone or via text or FaceTime or Zoom or whatnot, but just like making time to like reach out and stay connected to folks is going to be huge in terms of battling with depression. Okay. So switching is a little bit to anxiety. So the first strategy on the list is deep breathing, and deep breathing is always mentioned. And it's probably the coping strategy that I get the most eye rolls about whenever I mention, like, oh God, deep breathing again. And so I think where most people go wrong with deep breathing is they don't do it long enough, and people do it for like 1 or 2 cycles, and oh, that didn't help. That wasn't helpful. Well, it's not going to be helpful after doing it for a couple of minutes. Spending a good I'll say 5 to 6 minutes kind of going through it 8 to 10 times is what's going to be more beneficial. And deep breathing, like any other coping skill, most of the time is going to take you from like a level 10 anxiety to a level 0. You might have to couple it with something else. So it's kind of important to say that, deep breathing is just one tool in your toolbox and not the end all and be all. Next on the list is guided imagery, and that's just a fancy name for kind of going to your happy place. So thinking about a place or a space or a time where you felt like very relaxed, very calm, and then using your 5 senses to literally describe that space. The more detail you can get with describing that space, the more real it feels, and then the more anxiety relief you will experience. Okay, the next one on my list is about grounding. So, a hallmark of anxiety is worrying about either future oriented things, sort of this anticipatory worry, or things that have happened in the past. And grounding is all about the present moment and focusing on what's going on right now and to kind of reorient yourself to the here and the now. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is sort of using your different senses to get at that. So I'm hoping that one of you ladies will volunteer for me and kind of go through a really quick grounding exercise. So who's feeling brave this evening? Anybody?
Me too.
Oh, wait a minute. That's Allison. So let me go down so I can actually see your face. Okay. All right. So really easy. This is a really easy one. So we start with sight because that's the sense that you can observe the most with. So Allison, what are 5 things that you can see? And be sure to pay attention to the details, such as patterns on the ceiling, the way the light might reflect off of a surface, just things that you don't notice ordinarily. So
Okay.
5 things. Okay.
I noticed that the X on my Germ-X bottle is red, and it's kind of like an orange red, and I never noticed that the X was a different color.
Okay.
That's one. I noticed that the walls I thought were white in my office are actually like a creamy grayish color. Didn't know that before. I lived here for 5 years. I notice that um, that my desk, it has like these wood patterns in it that look really cool. They like have like this like splintering technique. I really think that's cool. I notice the green light on my computer indicating that I'm on video. And 5, I notice that my pens in my pen cup are not all facing the same direction. And it's interesting. Normally they are.
Very nice. All right. So 4 is the next sense that we can observe the most with, and that is touch. So what are 4 things that you can feel? So for this one, notice the sensations of the clothing on your body. If you're outside, the sun on your skin, the chair pushing up against your bottom. So pretty much anything that you can feel. So Allison, what are 4 things that you can feel currently?
I can feel my hair on my neck. I can feel my thighs on the chair, and I can feel the pressure from my pants between them. I can feel the cloth on my wrists, and I can feel the chapstick on my lips.
Very nice.
Is that 4?
I think that might have been 5, you overachiever.
Ooh, look at me go.
All right. So the next one is hearing. What are 3 things that you can hear? So pay attention to things that your mind usually tunes out.
Okay, I can hear the air conditioning cutting on every so often. I hear my cat locked in my bedroom crying out for help. I hear my fish tank across the room cycling water.
All right, that's 3. Okay, and next is smell. So what are 2 things that you can smell? So it might be just a scent in the air around you, air freshener if you're outside, freshly mowed grass, perfume, anything.
Okay, I did some laundry, so I definitely still smell fabric softener. I also smell a little bit of the lavender air freshener I have in my apartment.
Very nice, fancy. All right, and then last but certainly not least, one thing that you can taste, and if you have something or if you don't, that's okay. But for this one, you might want to carry like gum around or snacks or something just to kind of pop in your mouth, just to focus on those flavors. So is there anything that you can taste currently?
Not currently. I did just drink a bubble water before
Okay,
we started, so that's the closest I have to taste right now.
nice. All right. All right. And then last but not least, on this list, is perspective taking. So just sort of like getting kids in the habit of, whenever they have an event that's particularly anxiety producing for them, is this thing that's making you very stressed out in the moment going to be stressful, or is it going to be bothersome in a week from now, in a month from now, and then in a year from now? So that perspective taking kind of puts us in a space that, okay, well, this is not great right now. This is very distressing right now, but this isn't going to last forever, and I will be able to get past this. It's not going to matter in a year from now. It's not going to matter in a month from now. So that perspective taking is huge. All right. Next, accepts is an acronym. So sometimes in the moment we have distressing emotions that just seem impossible to overcome. And this particular skill set is supposed to help distract you in the moment until those very difficult emotions pass. A is for activities, C is contributions. Oh, sorry. That's okay. We'll keep. Okay. C is comparisons. E emotions. P pushing away. T is thoughts, and then S is sensations. So we'll kind of go through each one of these. Okay. Activities, kind of like behavioral activation, which I mentioned initially, is about kind of getting up and getting busy doing something. So it could be reading a book, writing in a journal, working on a project that you have. So anything that's going to kind of get you out of the moment that you're feeling the distress into doing something else that's more productive. Okay, next is contributing. So getting out there and doing something for somebody else. So this one is really nice because not only is it a good distraction, it also tends to increase our mood. So asking a friend about their day, making a gift for a loved one, volunteering are all things that are going to be really good distractions for you. It will increase your mood. All right. Comparisons is sort of like putting the situation in perspective by comparing it to something that you've experienced that was more distressing. Also, sort of thinking about, how did I overcome something similar or something worse in the past? And thinking about this situation is difficult, but I can do difficult things. So sort of that resiliency piece. All right. Emotions. So doing something to create a new emotion that's kind of opposite to what you're experiencing currently. So that's kind of what deep breathing is about. So when you're anxious, do deep breathing because it's kind of the opposite of being anxious. Feeling sad or down, do something that sort of brings you joy. So watching a movie, talking to friends, kind of anything that's going to be the opposite of whatever the current emotion that you're experiencing is. Pushing away is another one. So avoiding a painful situation or block it from your mind by using a technique. So kind of like guided imagery, kind of going to your happy place, thinking about something else to kind of push the current distressing emotion out of your mind, at least temporarily. T is for thoughts. So using a mental strategies to sort of shift your attention to something more neutral. So one that I often tell kiddos to do is start with the letter A or whatever, and then name objects that you see in the room that have that start with that same letter. You can also name a specific or count a specific object around you. So how many trees do you see? How many bricks do you see? So things like that, just to kind of distract you in that moment. All right, and then last but not least, sensations. So find safe physical sensations to distract you from the distressing emotion. So hold an ice cube in your hand to kind of get your mind off of it. Eating something spicy might kind of help to keep your mind off of the distressing emotion, or taking a cold shower is a sensation that will kind of get your mind off the distressing emotion in the meantime. All right, that's it.
Hi, I'm Janet Fluker, and I'm in the Dunwoody office, and we're going to talk about self-care for parents. Now, you might ask yourself, what does self-care really mean? And I often get clients asking me that question. What do you mean by self-care? People say that all the time, and I really don't understand what I need to be doing. Well, a wonderful metaphor for self-care is putting on your own oxygen mask first. And if you see the diagram here, this photo, what you'll notice is you're assuming it's a mother, and she's pulling down the oxygen mask in the airplane. And this is something we've all seen whenever we've traveled. We may not pay attention, but if you'll really take a look at the photo in number 4, she's putting it on her child, and she had to put it on herself first and then put it on her child. And that's what we've been told to do, because if you pass out because you're not getting oxygen and the pressure has changed in the cabin, then you're not going to be able to help your child. So we have to focus on taking care of ourselves first, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we literally cannot be there for other people. So I like to keep this metaphor in the back of my mind when I'm thinking about self-care and what does that really mean. Now, there's another reason that we want to focus on taking care of ourselves, and that is that our children take our emotional cues from us. And what that means is that if we are calm and centered, it's going to be much easier for them to be calm and centered as well. Now, we can't be in this place all the time. There are going to be days where we're having a hard time and we're struggling. And so what do we do then? Well, that's when you acknowledge verbally, maybe, that you're having a hard day, and then you take a break and you go and calm yourself down and then come back into the situation. And that teaches your children that it's okay to not be doing well in the moment, but you can do something about it. You can take a break, you can go calm yourself down, and then come back to the situation. But one of the main reasons that we want to take care of ourselves in our families is so that we can be emotionally present for our children. That helps them to know that they have someone that they can come to, they can talk to, and that you're not going to be upset and anxious if they're bringing their problems to you. I think it's challenging, but it's definitely something that we can all improve on. So how do you take care of yourself? Well, first of all, you've got to ask yourself the question, how am I doing? Sometimes we are so busy as parents, particularly if you have been working full-time from home and trying to help your kids do their schoolwork over the computer, you may not be paying any attention to how you're doing. So you really have to stop and ask yourself, how am I feeling? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling sad because I can't see my friends and family? Am I feeling bored because it feels like Groundhog Day, same thing over and over? Or am I feeling irritable? So until you can identify how you're feeling, you're not going to be able to answer the question, what do I need? So if you're feeling anxious, then maybe what you need to do is practice some of the mindfulness and meditation techniques that we've already talked about. All of the things we've talked about that help your kids will help you as well. So you can practice those things if you're feeling anxious to help yourself calm down. If you're feeling sad, what do you need? Do you need to call a friend? Do you need to video chat with your parents because it's been a little while? What's going to help you get through that sadness? Or are you feeling bored? Do you need to plan some fun things to do? Maybe you need to pull out some board games, or you guys do puzzles together, or maybe you just need to plan a time to do a hobby that you love that you've put off because you've been so busy. So really focus on what you need, and then think about what can you do in order to meet that need. We spend a lot of time when we're stuck in situations like we have been with COVID, thinking about all the things we can't do, all the things that we've lost, or all the things that are too hard to try to do now. And it's really more helpful to focus on what you can do. If you can't get away on a vacation, can you at least take a walk around the neighborhood for 10 minutes? If you can't take a spa day for yourself, can you at least maybe take a bubble bath at night? I mean, there are many things that you can do that can meet the need. That may not be what you used to do, but it can still serve that same purpose. So that's an important focus, I think, that we need to have. And it also teaches our children the same thing. So when our children are complaining, one of the things we can do is just kind of turn it around and say, okay, well, I understand that you can't get together and play outside with all of your friends today, but what could you do? Maybe you all can get on a Zoom together. Maybe you can play a game together over Zoom. Let's look at what you can do. And that gives us a sense of power, a sense of control over our lives. That's one of the things we've lost in COVID, is that there's so many things that we don't have control over. And that can lead us to feeling frustrated. And so focusing on what you can do can really help alleviate that. So what are some of the things in self-care that are really important? One very important piece of self-care is the attitude that you have towards yourself. Are you having compassion towards yourself? And what does that really mean? That is the opposite of self-judgment. It's the opposite of saying to yourself, oh, I should do this, or I should do that, or I should be able to, make everything work. In reality, it's really hard what we're trying to do right now. And can you have compassion for the fact that this has really been challenging? Can you say to yourself, I am doing the best I can, and my children are doing the best that they can, and we're all struggling together. We're not alone in this, but we can have compassion for ourselves in this really difficult situation. I was talking to someone today who, through all of the comments that she was making, it was all about what she should be doing. And I finally stopped and said, do you hear how anxious that makes you when you're constantly comparing yourself to what you should be doing? Instead, maybe focus on those positives that you are doing and have compassion for how hard this is. You can use mindfulness, and the exercise that Allison just did can be one way to get yourself grounded and centered. Meditation is great. There are, a million apps out there that you can use, and maybe 5 minutes is all you need to have some time to care for yourself and focus on calming yourself down. Taking breaks. That's hard to do, but sometimes you can try to take breaks with whatever adults are in your household. You can just trade off, and everybody gets a 10-minute walk during the day. And just doing that can give you a chance to breathe. Having rituals of self-care. I know a ritual that I used to do, and I still do this actually, but when my kids were growing up, a cup of coffee in the morning and reading a book for 15 minutes. And I would set my alarm so that I would be the first one up. And what that said to me is that I'm a priority and I can do something that's important to me. So those kinds of rituals can be really helpful, just to kind of ground yourself. And then having support, reaching out to your friends, to your family, professional support if you need that. We've seen a rise in anxiety and depression during COVID, and there's no judgment in reaching out and asking for help professionally if that's something that's going to help you take care of yourself so that you can be there for your children. Finding time to spend with your friends can be something like a phone call or a Zoom call. I know my best girlfriend and I have gotten together every other week like we have done for 30 years. For tea, and we would meet outside with our masks on, or we meet on her back porch all wrapped up in the winter drinking hot tea. And that, I can honestly say, has helped me quite a bit just to get through these difficult days of COVID. So one of the things that I want to leave us with is that it's okay to be gentle with yourself. It's okay to modify your expectations, to not expect to have a spotless house and everything organized and everything complete. But it's okay to have compassion for yourself and to remember, and I really like what Alexa said at the beginning, that parents are the true heroes of this pandemic. And so I just want you to hold that thought as we close tonight.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to the mayor to take some questions.
Great. We have a couple of questions. The first one is submitted through our chat, which is, I'm a survivor of childhood abuse, and I'm pretty sure my teenage daughter inherited the trauma. She has horrible anxiety. How can I help her effectively? And if y'all could share, pick one or two of you maybe to answer the question from this mom.
I'd be more than happy to.
Okay.
So I work with a lot of kiddos, and I know that it does kind of become generational because you see, like, I forgot who said it, but we see our parents' coping skills. So I think it's important for you to maybe do these coping skills together, learn some coping skills or model them to your child, and definitely be honest with them and say, I've had anxiety myself, and these are some things that have really helped me. Let's do them together.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, because our kids do see us a lot, like she might be noticing like, oh, mom's stressed, like so there must be danger. If you ever catch yourself doing that, just say, oh, there's my anxiety again. It's probably, we're probably going to be fine. And just being frank, that always really helps. Because again, over 80% of our communication is nonverbal, because we're such social animals, and kids, especially with their parents, like they're always reading us. So if you can catch it and then just say like, yeah, I know. And you probably get that from me. And I get nervous because of this and this, but we're going to be okay. And any work that you can do to heal yourself, because you deserve that.
We have another question that was sent in ahead of time, and it's about a fourth grader, but we're talking about kids in general. And she said, normally my son is the smiling, happy child that is always making a joke about something or adding his humorous insight to an event. Recently, he has been telling me that he is feeling depressed and down. I have asked him why he feels this way, and he says he usually doesn't know. It may be because he misses his friends. Closest friend moved away. Another close friend is doing virtual school. I'm sure the removal from the normal ways of everything has taken a toll on him. I have tried different strategies with him to think about things to look forward to doing, playing soccer, family games, outings, upcoming events, etc. And he is happy in those moments of doing those things. However, the minute that these things end, he is back to saying he is depressed. I am not sure what to do to help him. Do you have any advice or suggestions for this mom or dad?
I think it's so interesting. I don't know about my colleagues, but I know the adults, the children, the teenagers I've been seeing, I mean, it's almost a script. So mom, you are not alone. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to the collective trauma that I was talking about. We had some real heroes and rock stars in the beginning that were just kind of plowing their way through, and we were all just set to the business of getting through it. And it has been a year, and I really think that all of our tanks are kind of empty. So monitoring definitely for any kind of danger signs, like any sort of suicidality. And you can be blunt when you ask. A lot of people are worried about asking if kids are having those thoughts. You're not going to put the idea in his head. In fact, by addressing it, a lot of times they feel like, okay, she can handle it. Like if I do say yes, whereas a lot of times kids feel like they need to protect us. And again, and this is the hardest part, and I hate having to say it because I want answers for my kids too, other than saying just to sit in it with him and just know that it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, and just remind him all the time that you love him, who he is. And I love that she already said that she's reminding him all the exciting things to come, and that they're doing what they can, because in my opinion, I feel like that's all we can do right now. Like she is doing it all. And I wish there was something more like a magic wand, but.
Does anyone else have something to add?
I would agree with that. And then definitely normalizing that this is hard for all of us. It's hard for mom and dad. It's hard for your friends, and everybody is feeling this way. Because when there's depression, then there's also that sense of I'm alone and withdrawal. So I think that's a big part.
I was going to say I agree with both those ladies, but I also think that parents can sort of start to help kids identify some of those antecedents that come before the feeling of feeling sad. So like, what thought did you have right before you had this emotion, and kind of start the process of trying to, tease that apart a bit and maybe get at, okay, well, what's happening to make you feel this way?
That's good strategies. So this question is a little different, but what do you recommend to parents of kids who have gotten very comfortable at staying home for the last year? And the idea of getting dressed to go to school, or going to play soccer, or joining friends at the park is all totally overwhelming. And maybe they say they don't want to do it. The pandemic this is the mayor speaking, not the question. The pandemic is going to end. And it's not just kids that are probably feeling that way. There's probably some adults as well. And so what thoughts do you have about that for parents?
Well, again, normalizing and acknowledging it, and actually having a very direct conversation about this is going to be hard. When school is back in session, you have to get up every day at 7:30 or 7 o'clock and get to school. you know, this is going to be a big change and we need to keep talking about it while it's happening. That it's going to happen to all of us.
And the good news is that usually the good things that come with that, like the connection and the belonging, like it's kind of a pain and they might drag their feet, but usually once we kind of get back to that normal state, the rewards outweigh the feet dragging.
So, Ms. Murphy, do you want to take a minute to talk about how families can access your services? I think sometimes kids, adolescents, and adults could benefit from some professional help, and families. And so I'd love for you to share your resources. But you're muted. I'm sorry, you're muted.
I almost made it all the way through the presentation. I've got a slide up on here that has our contact information to our website and to our front office if you're interested in learning more about how to schedule an appointment with one of these lovely ladies. Like I said, Heather is at both Dunwoody High School and Peachtree Charter Middle School. So you can call that same number to schedule with her. And she is currently seeing a lot of kiddos virtually and will be transitioning back to the school as those kids transition back, but will also still be offering virtual for those families that have chosen to stay virtual. All of our other therapists have office hours at our Dunwoody location, which we just moved. Dunwoody UMC has given us space in their building, so we have offices there. But it's that phone number 678-893-5300 is a great place to start, and our front office can help guide you through which therapist would be the best fit for you and to get you scheduled. And I will say all of our therapists, even our therapists that are in the office, are also offering virtual sessions. So you know, when we started this, we had just started at the Summit a pilot program training a handful of our therapists in telehealth, and made that transition very quickly, quicker than we all thought we would were going to have to. But all of our therapists now are offering that service, and have some clients that will probably want to stay that way even when we go back completely face to face.
I want to thank you all for another wonderful program. Your advice has been invaluable. This has been a really difficult, challenging year. And I imagine we might see you again later this year as we start to come out of the pandemic and families struggle with what that looks like. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being a great partner to the city of Dunwoody and to the families and the children in our community. And thank everyone for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.